Okay.
Welcome Wargamers, this is Doug with 2+ Stuff, and today we are digging into the lore of Skarbrand, and by extension all the Bloodthirsters of Khorne as well. This video is requested by Craig Dawson, and if you have an Age of Sigmar lore question you would like answered, go ahead, click subscribe, and leave it in the comments down below. I read all of your comments and use many of them as inspiration for future videos. Without further ado, we're going to start talking about Bloodthirsters in general, and then get more specific about Skarbrand about halfway through. Now, if you're not familiar with what demons are in the Age of Sigmar setting, what they really are is manifestations of their patron god. For example, Khorne's demons represent his aspects, the need for bloodshed, martial prowess, being the strongest warrior, proving that you can, capture the most land, have the most skulls, create the most carnage, things like that. Nurgle is all about the diseases and the plagues, and so forth. All of them represent the gods that they are made from. Largely, it's considered because a god, so let's say Khorne for example, because we're talking about Bloodthirsters, will break off a piece of himself, create its own little sentience, make it life basically, but it's based on a template of him, and then send that demon into the mortal realms. Now, why do they do this? Well, the simple answer is Khorne's frankly too big to go anywhere, right? He's so massive and powerful, and it requires so much to keep him stable in the real world that basically he creates these agents of him to do his bidding. When you do enough of them, you form an army and things tend to grow. Well, just like any army, there are grunts. These would be the bloodletters, the smaller guys. And then he has the Bloodthirsters, which act as his generals and also his personal guard. Now, as to be expected with Khorne's favorite number being 8, there are 8 tiers of Bloodthirsters. And from the model range and stories that we have, really we only get to see 3 of these tiers. Coincidentally, the ones that we get access to in the story are also the ones that have the names of the model kits that you can build from the single Bloodthirster kit. So, for example, there is the Bloodthirster Wrath of Khorne. This will be the 3rd tier on that 8-tier ratio, and he is armed with the axe and the flail, which is kind of the more generic Bloodthirster. And this tier, the Wrath of Khorne, acts as agents of vengeance against anyone who has personally insulted Khorne himself. If you do anything to slight Khorne, he's going to send one of these guys to get retribution. Basically, their function is to keep his honor by slaying people who would slight him. The 6th tier is called the Incessant Rage, the Bloodthirsters of Incessant Rage, like you see in the model, and this is the one carrying the massive double-handed axe. Like I said, this is the 6th tier, and that is their job, their role within the Khorne kind of force organization, if you can call it that, is that these guys are sent to shatter seemingly unbreakable foes. If there is a fortress or a force, an army that is people can't seem to crack, he sends these guys in with a big axe and just decimates it. And the last one we have access to is the Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury. This is the 8th tier, and they march at the head of major armies. So they basically act like really exalted generals. And just kind of put it in perspective, the ranks go from number 1, the 1st tier being the best, to 8 being the worst. So Unfettered Fury, the one that we probably see the most of leading armies and things like that, is the most common, but it's also the lowest ranking Bloodthirster. Important to note that it still means he is like the highest ranking of the demon types. It's just within the certain context of like the authority that Khorne gives them, they're on the lowest in the totem pole. And of course, I imagine the other 5 ranks of Bloodthirsters all have suitably really awesome job roles that they do and kind of add flavor to the army itself. But where does Skarbrand fit into this? Well, he actually has an incredibly interesting story. See, once upon a time, Skarbrand was the most beloved and favorite of all Bloodthirsters. He was a baller, right? He could do all the jobs that all the tiers did. He was the right-hand man of Khorne. Absolutely loved the guy. To put this in perspective, it's much like Kairos Fate Reaver is to Tzeentch, and now we're learning that Horticulus Slimex is to Nurgle. Kind of like, they're not necessarily as good as or strong as the god themselves, but they're just like so close and so perfectly embody the nature of their patron god. Once upon a time, 2 other Bloodthirsters challenged Skarbrand, saying, "There's no reason you're the favorite. There's no reason you're the best child." And they tried to take him on, and so Skarbrand himself killed both demons and bound their souls into his axes, which are named Carnage and Slaughter. Okay, so let's put this in perspective. He is a demon wielding 2 demon weapons. On all 3 of the demons in this equation are Bloodthirsters, like the top demon in the Khorne army. Now, he gained the status of being Khorne's favorite after obliterating a Slaanesh fortress. Now, that's the only thing that the lore bit about him we really get. We don't know if this was like an outpost that was created in the Mortal Realms, or my thought is that it's actually Slaaneş's chunk in the Realm of Chaos that was taken over in his absence, because I think that would have much more significance. Like a champion who does that in the Realm of Chaos, I think would earn much more esteem than taking over like a literal fortress in the Mortal Realms. So, because I mean, if you think about the Realm of Chaos, that would expand Khorne's empire quite a bit, and it would be something very, very sizable to hang your hat on. And also what I want to point out in this is that to take over a fortress is not just to run forward and smash, like most Khorne things do. Whenever we get depictions of people leading armies and breaking defense and like that, the leaders of these Khorne tribes are very intelligent. They're very sharp. And so that's something we don't see too much of Skarbrand, and we'll get to that why in a little bit. But at some point, he was incredibly tactful. He must have been a great general to make these kinds of things happen, and I don't want to miss that. But unfortunately, all things have to come to an end, and Skarbrand's end was really his own. You see, he became very prideful as the favorite child, the right-hand man of Khorne. And all it took was Tzeentch in some capacity whispering into his ear and tempted him to revolt against Khorne. He said, you can take Khorne. You can take his place. You can assert yourself as Khorne and then lead everything. So the next time Khorne's back was turned, he attacked with all his might, just went full hog into the back of Khorne with the twin axes that he has. And for all that effort and for everything that he would lose, he managed to put a small chink in Khorne's armor. Now, as you can imagine, the god of bloodshed and destruction is not really happy or pleased with this. So his punishment to Skarbrand is incredibly intense, and so it kind of operates in a few different ways. The first one is he wipes his mind. He just destroys any sense of consciousness within him. This is important as something we've harkened back to quite a few times in the lore reviews, where I think a heavy theme in Age of Sigmar is identity. We're talking about the Stormcast Eternals slowly losing who they are and becoming these kind of automaton warriors, and what that does to people. Well, he just had that same process done, but in an instant rather than over time, over several reforgings. So if you are a Stormcast player and that is a bit of the lore and kind of like thought process that interests you, it definitely did happen to Skarbrand. So remember I talked about how great of a general he must have been to achieve these things, and how cunning and how, just perfect for Khorne he must have been. That's all gone. He wiped it all clean. The next thing Khorne did to punish Skarbrand is to basically cast him out of the Realm of Chaos. He put him in his hand and chucked him like a softball into the Mortal Realms. And in doing so, he moved with such speed and ferocity that when he crash landed, it obviously messed up his face. If you've seen the Skarbrand model, he has like a skull showing through the one half of his face got burned away. It also burned his wings, so no longer can he fly. He's actually the only Bloodthirster that cannot fly. And with that exile, he is no longer allowed to return to the Mortal Realms. We see him several times in stories where he's bouncing around different realms and locations. And that's because Khorne basically picks him up and chucks him somewhere else, and picks him up and chucks him somewhere else, battlefield to battlefield. Just being a tool, but never really coming home. Even when he's destroyed, he kind of just seems to pop up somewhere else. And from that punishment, he is now insane, and he can't distinguish friend and foe. He destroys every single thing he sees. Now, there's kind of a catch here, though. Khorne was pleased with his punishment because now Skarbrand serves him better than he ever did before, as a wild, crazed killing machine that just obliterates everything. Khorne is so pleased with that because even though he was the right-hand man and favorite child before, now he's even better. Which just kind of gives you a twisted sense of how Khorne is not maternal like Nurgle is, right? This is a very twisted sense of like your followers and a piece of you and things like that. Skarbrand was actually a huge player in the Rumgate Wars. He came up several times, almost to the point where some people were complaining because he kind of seemed like a plot MacGuffin, right? If you want something to happen, like chuck Skarbrand there. But he really did come up quite a bit. I understand that, but also it was a time to focus on Khorne in general, and so who better represents the kind of insanity that he can bring than Skarbrand? And I would agree with that. In the book God Beasts, they basically dropped the top of a mountain on him just to get him to go away. He didn't die permanently. He just got rolled off and was so livid that he let out a scream that exploded people's heads for several hundred yards. When you see him in these books, he's just slicing through Stormcast Eternals left and right. He is not a passive player in these things. He shows up and Carnage starts immediately. He goes through Stormcast, like I said, worm knife through butter. I like the fact that even though Stormcast kept getting new and better models and better heroes and like that, nothing could ever seem to contain or truly take on Skarbrand. And so those are really the facts we know about him. I mean, there's not a lot to tell because really there's not a lot going on. He had his brain wiped. There are a few blurbs here and there about some backstory with the deception of Tzeentch, and the fact that he was the favorite Bloodthirster of all time. But really, those are the facts that we know. So let's talk for a second, like we always do in these things, about why this character is awesome. And I think that's definitely the crux of the lore videos that I put out. Why this character is awesome. And here's the thing. We learn so much about the nature of chaos and demons from Skarbrand's story. If you do a little like deducing and think about things, we learn quite a bit, and things have changed since Warhammer Fantasy Battles. But we'll save the best for last. Let's start off with the fact that this is a demon who wields 2 demon weapons, okay? That is so legit. That is the coolest thing ever. Each one, he's a Bloodthirster with a Bloodthirster in each hand. That is incredibly cool, and I really, really appreciate that just as a narrative thing. As I said, he shows us a lot about the nature of demons specifically. One is that they are agents of free will. In previous times, it seemed like demons were kind of automatons in the sense of their god knew everything they did and they couldn't really go against their patron deity. But this one clearly, to stab Khorne in the back, he must have had some personal animosity. But second, free will in the sense of I can betray him, I can become even greater. So that is incredibly important. As we read stories going forward, you have to keep in mind that this is not just a physical representation of any chaos god, whichever one it is, but they are a free agent that happens to, in most cases, go along with, follow, believe, and are devout to their god. Another thing we learned, and I actually learned this in other books as well, and kind of piece it together, is that demons in general are much more stable than they ever were in any of the previous editions of the book. It used to be, much like it is in 40k now, but in Warhammer Fantasy Battles as well, where demons could really only materialize in the physical realm for a certain amount of time, right? If there was a warp rift that opened up, they would pour out, destroy everything, and the second the battle was over and there was nothing more generating that kind of chaos or warp energy, they would kind of dissipate. But what we're learning in Age of Sigmar through books now is that no, when a god creates a demon, they just exist, period. So Skarbrand is banished from the realm of chaos. He can't come back. That means he must be able to survive completely self-sustainably outside of it. Likewise, in the book Nagash the Undying King, there is a Herald of Nurgle that requires no warp gate. I mean, he's completely stable. He's a main character. He walks for hundreds of miles with the rest of the army and things like that. So we're learning that demons are much more stable and real than they ever were in the older books. And that's incredibly important because my complaint with demons before has always been like, well, they don't have a lot of character. I could give him a name, but why would I? He just dissipates and goes back into the warp and we don't see him again. But this is like, no, they can be here. They can launch entire crusades and campaigns and be with main characters. They're much more of a stable character that you can build an army around and frankly just a narrative around. We also learned that demons have sentience. What's important is like I said, free will. It kind of goes hand in hand with that, but they can think independently, and what's more important is that independent thinking can be taken away. As I said earlier, if you're a Stormcast player, this should stand out to you. I had mentioned that Stormcast lose their identity time and time again, a little bit more each time they die and are reforged, whereas Skarbrand had his wiped in an instant by Khorne's punishment. Here's the thing, I want you to consider this. Skarbrand is a much better servant of Khorne with his brain wiped, right? His identity gone. Is that the same for Stormcast Eternals? Is every time they die and are reforged, they are horrified to each other of the fact that like Gardas is becoming less and less of himself, but is that a better form to Sigmar for his purposes? Because that has really dark implications for Sigmar, what we perceive to be and are told to be the good guys. That doesn't seem very, very good, and I think that's a fascinating kind of rabbit hole to bring your mind down. Is the loss of self a benefit or a detriment to their patron god? Obviously, in Khorne's case, he's way more excited to have Skarbrand be mindless. What about Sigmar? We also learned that demons and chaos gods interact with each other much more fluently than we did before. For example, beforehand we would just think, oh, if Skarbrand was standing in a room and Tzeentch shows up and says, hey, you should kill Khorne, Skarbrand's initial response is to kill Tzeentch, right? I would never listen to you, you're my enemy. But there's some kind of interaction play together where Tzeentch was able to interact with Skarbrand enough to tempt him and turn him against his patron god. Now, I'm not literally saying that Tzeentch walked into a room with Skarbrand and said, hey, I got a plan for you. But I mean that it's most likely, imagine like subtle manipulations, but the fact that they do interact with each other on a personal level is very new and very exciting. And frankly, it's an area I want them to explore more. I want to see these Chaos Warbands interacting with each other, and I'd love to see demons doing that as well. So friends, that's everything I know about Skarbrand and Bloodthirsters in general. They are big, they're bad, and they are awesome and all about Khorne. If you like what you heard and want to support me in a more personal way, consider heading over to the 2+ Stuff store in the link down below. I have a range of gaming mats for the Realm of Death, which will be perfect for the upcoming Malign Portents campaign, which I will be talking about here pretty soon. And if you decide not to, that's completely fine. I'm just so glad you spent some time with me here today. I look forward to seeing you in my next lore video. Thank you so much, and happy wargaming.